Hey, so what's going on everyone? I'm Derek and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'll be introducing to you 5 simple but effective ways that you can do even right now to help you better manage your time. And if you practice all 5 strategies well, you can save up to even 2 weeks worth of your time in a single year. Previously, I've done a video on how I manage my own time, and if you haven't checked that out already, do give it a watch so that will give you a better idea of how I'm using those 5 strategies to better manage my time. So before getting into the 5 ways, I would like to touch on the point about managing our time. As you already know, money and possessions can be earned, but time is something that once it's gone, it's never coming back again. So understanding the importance of time is extremely crucial if you want to be better at time management. So one thing I've learned about time management is that if you have a clearly defined goal, it will help you a lot along the way. Because with clearly defined goals, you will know what you are putting your time into and what you're doing along the way to make sure that you're getting to your goals. So all of us have our own priorities and we need to know how do we differentiate those priorities. So personally, I think that priorities can come in 2 ways. So one could be how urgent a task is, and second being how important that task is. One thing to note is that urgent doesn't mean that it is important. Vice versa, important doesn't mean that it is urgent. When I mean urgent, it just means when do you need to do the task. Whereas for importance, it defines how long or how much of a time you're spending on it. Some examples of what urgent can stand for could be like immediate phone call or text message, whereas important would mean things like spending time with your family or your own recreational personal time. Going right into the topic today, first up we have learning how to say no. You need to learn how to say no, and the process of you learning it is a form of art. Learning how to say no can really give you a lot more time, be it at work, school, or even at home. At work, you will be required to say no at times because when you say yes, you might be overpromising if you are not able to fulfill the task that you promised to do so. When you overpromise, you put a lot of pressure on yourself because it's either you have to put in more time to fulfill that particular task that you said yes to, or you have to forgo something else which come in the form of spending time with your family, etc. just so that you can fulfill this additional task that you took on, which you could have said no to. For example, will you rather deliver a shabby work to a client and potentially losing the client forever, or being straight out honest and be frank about your capabilities? Tell them what your limits are, what your boundaries is like, because if you don't communicate, you won't know what the outcome would be, and the client wouldn't know as well. I believe people prefer to have reliability, because to me, I would rather have someone who can keep to their promises rather than me having to second guess whether or not they could even complete their work. So by learning how to say no, you can potentially free up almost up to 1 hour a week on the tasks that you might deem as not as important or not as urgent at that point in time, and you could potentially help yourself save up to 52 hours in a year if you are able to practice it accurately and correctly in the workspace or school. So second up on the list, it is to learn how to negotiate better. Negotiate what you need to accomplish with the stakeholders that you're dealing with. So for example, if someone were to just approach you suddenly and ask you a quick question while you're busy and engaged in your work, so you can negotiate by saying things like, I'm a bit caught up right now, but I have 5 minutes to spare. Would that work with you? By doing so, you're limiting the amount of time that you expense here, which is restricted to that 5 minutes that you promise. Or you can also provide alternatives to the person, such as by saying, I have some time tomorrow morning, but if you only need 5 minutes, I can do it now. By having such conversations, you put yourself in control. Other things that you can do is to check in again with them on when do they need the task to be done by, or when do they need to have the conversation by, so that you are able to plan and fit that timing into your calendar, highly suited towards your own convenience. So by communicating with the other party, it allows for a situation whereby you could have a win-win situation, because you may not know what are some of the constraints that the other party might be facing, and you could be negotiating for an even better time slot for the both of you. Third up on the list is learn to delegate. If you are able to delegate an hour's worth of tasks to 5 different people, that's 5 hours saved in 1 single week. And if you have the funds, you could even pay others to do the work for you. So essentially, if you think about it, we are doing this on a daily basis whenever we make transactions. If you're using a food delivery app, you're essentially paying the rider for his time to delivering the food to your place so that you don't have to spend the time to get out and go on to purchase the food yourself. So whatever that I've mentioned, those are just some examples of delegating. But to know what you should delegate, it depends on what your goals are. So for example, if you're in the F&B business and you're an F&B business owner, what you should be focusing on is focus on F&B. Focus on how do you cook the food better, focus on how do you reach out to your customer better. And with that, you should leave the other stuff to external vendors who you can trust and afford. I think one thing to note here is that if you're spending time and effort on things that aren't your business core competency, then something is wrong here. So the fourth would be improving on the existing systems or processes that you're using. Basically improving on how you're doing things on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. So for example, if I'm doing something like data entry, I would think about how I can automate the process. And this is where I think learning coding or some form of basic programming would help a lot. So for example, if I'm generating invoices or receipts, instead of keying all the names and details into a spreadsheet and then printing them out one by one, what I could do is I could use some of the existing tools that have this form of automation that is in place for it. So for example, like Airtable. Basically by using Airtable, I'm able to generate the whole list of invoice and receipts all at one go without spending additional time on it. So just by Googling out what are some of the key softwares that you can use to automate your daily tasks would really help you a lot, because it would really help to save so much time as compared to you doing it on your own manually. However, the catch here is that you have to make sure that the process that you're working on or you're trying to automate is something that has been in place for quite a while, whereby there won't be huge changes made to the entire process, so that it makes the automation process worthwhile. Last but not least, be less strict on your work and on yourself. It might sound a bit counterintuitive, like why would you be less strict on your work? However, what I mean by this is, if you're working on a task that is not as important to you, for example, such as the daily task of folding of your own clothes, you don't need all your clothes to be 100% perfectly aligned when you fold them. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you can make do with it, then you should just let it be. You shouldn't be spending additional amount of time trying to make certain tasks be extremely perfect. The key thing here is to be able to set time limit for the unimportant things. And the goal right here is to reduce the amount of time you are spending on such tasks, so that you can have the time and energy to focus on things that are important. So these are just the 5 tips that I briefly shared, and I know it's not very in-depth into like how do you really practice it into your daily lives, but I would hope that you can give it a thought and think about how you can incorporate some of these tips into your daily lives and help you with time management. If not, I really hope that you have learned at least 1 or 2 things from this video. And if you have any other tips that you'd like to share about how we can better manage our time, please comment them down below so that everyone can learn from it. That's all that I have for now. I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe and take care.